Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Munro Live podcast. Today we have a great guest, Brendan Jones, the CEO of Blink. And he has really an amazing career. I think 21 years at Nissan, a little bit of time at EVgo, Electrify America, and now at Blink. So, really a great guest having you on today. And I think our viewers would really like to get a little bit of context of your journey. Can you start at Nissan and maybe introduce yourself and go from there?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Brendan Jones, and I've been in this great space now since officially 2008 while I was at Nissan, and I got assigned a study project on trying to map out what EV customers and EV drivers would look like, what their needs were, how they differentiated from internal combustion engine customers, and that started it all. And from there at Nissan, I moved in to take over the role of leading both the vehicle sales of the Nissan Leaf when it was introduced and building out infrastructure. And it was interesting back then. So we were the first mass-produced vehicle out. So there was still a lack of understanding of what infrastructure was. And we actually began selling the car, and there was no DC fast chargers in the ground. And the debate was still brewing if you even needed more than 110. So, charging speed for DCs was 24 kilowatts up to 50.
Oh my, yeah.
And 50 kilowatt units were, $65,000 to $70,000 to purchase one of those units. So you fast forward, we helped EVgo structure into a full U.S. presence. They had a settlement in California and some business in Texas. So we bought into them at Nissan. I sat on the board for a little while. And then they recruited me over to be a vice president there. And we're eventually going to move things around, but they got bought out. EVgo has now been sold 4 times since I left them. And when all that was going on, I had a lot of friends at VW who were working through the settlement. And they said, hey, when we get to structuring this new company, would you be interested in coming on? And I said, yeah, sure. So I was the first employee there and the COO for the company for almost 4 years before Blink came knocking on the door and said, hey, you want to be president and then, take over? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So here we are today. So I think, I would characterize my career as, at the early stage, a lot of experimentation, making a lot of mistakes, learning from those mistakes as we've moved forward. And it's a journey of constant education on what chargers are all about, the different cars, the different methodologies of charging, and try and bring practicality to what is, it's interesting. It's a very emotional space, as well as very progressive and very cutting edge. So we're always trying to bring the common sense approach, how to spend our capital wisely to get as many ports out there for the EV driving public as possible.
Man, you're like the grandfather of EV charging or the charging dawn,
Yeah, there's a couple of us out there that have been
God.
around for a long time. So I'll take grandfather, although we don't have any grandkids yet. So, but God willing, we will one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really incredible that you were in the early stages back then with the Nissan Corporation, because you're right. Charging has come such a long way. And I still feel like we're at a little bit past infancy where things are starting to kind of take shape. And your company right now, Blink, is really active in multiple continents, so you have a presence in the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. Can you go a little bit over Blink's business plan and the products you offer, and then some of the services? Because I noticed you have some services where you have 440,000 people signed up to the Blink network. So can you maybe explain for our listeners and our viewers what that means?
Yeah, sure. So Blink it's a company that's been around since 2009, actually. And it was one of the first companies, even when I was at Nissan, we helped fund by either providing them free charges or a degree of funding back in those days so they can get a footprint across the United States. Now, it's gone through some ebbs and flows since that time, but in 2018, it got publicly listed on NASDAQ and was able to produce a product on their own that was quite receptive. The marketplace responded to it positively. However, it didn't really see its big growth span until 2020. And when I joined in that time around March, it had about 40 employees. We now have 650 employees in the company. We're now operating in 27 different countries, and we do everything that needs to be done in charging. Meaning, we'll sell equipment if somebody wants that. We'll own and operate the equipment, so we'll put it in the ground, own and operate it, and maintain it. When we sell it, we'll also operate it for you, and then you get the revenue. But we'll charge an operations fee for that. And we do fleet services as well. And we launched a brand new network, and that network, as you just said, it supports all of our customers globally. And we just integrated in the Semiconnect network because we bought that company last year. We bought two other charging companies in Europe, what helped establish our European side. So what Blink wants to do is they want to be the charging company that doesn't say no to any of the customers. And it doesn't matter whether that is a municipality, somebody with a charger in their home, a hotel, a hospitality, or a healthcare agency. If they want to own the equipment, well, we have a solution for them. They want to partner with us on who owns it and share in revenue, we'll partner with us. They want a turnkey, we'll do that. And that way we differentiate ourselves, and we're an EV solutions provider, and that it's all vertically integrated, meaning that we build our own chargers, we design and develop and maintain our own network, all by Blink employees, not by third parties. And then, we maintain the network and the chargers out in the field, and we're the only company in the industry to do that full circle.
Yeah. So I feel like your bread and butter is that middle ground, the hotels, the Targets, the Walgreens, the working with businesses. Is that your strength? Because I feel like some of the there's other players that focus more on the level 3 and the 350 kilowatt DC chargers. I did notice you are offering some DC fast chargers, but is your strength in that middle market, that level 2 municipalities and whatnot?
Always.
Yeah.
But it's based on a fundamental premise. So that, and we know when we look at McKinsey data and data from Bloomberg and others, Price Cooper's Waterhouse and other research firms, that they continuously come back with the same data for the last 10 years, that 90% of the kilowatts dispensed globally are going to be level 2. And then the other 10% are going to be DC fast charger or other, depending on what the other is. And it could be 110, it could be a couple other things, right, that are mixed into that. So our portfolio is around there. It's about 6% DC right now, and the other 94% being L2s. L2, when you install an L2 charger, it's about 15 to 21 in terms of the capital needed, as opposed to what a DC fast charger is. So, and I've installed 5, 6, 7,000 DC fast charging stations, so I know quite a bit about that, and we do it. And we're installing in Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and a couple other states right now on the DC fast charger front. But really, you need to charge these vehicles where they sit. And when we ask this fundamental question of everybody, hey, where's the gas station of the future? People want to say it's putting chargers along the highway. But no, the gas station of the future is in your home. It's in your multifamily dwelling. It's at your doctor's office. It's at your workplace for workplace charging. That's the gas station of the future. And we really need to focus on the simplicity of charging and the ease of installation to make sure that where that car sits, and it's funny, we all lose sight of this, but the Department of Transportation has published this statistic year in and year out, 95% of the time, the car sits.
Yeah.
And
This
we don't
sits at
like to
home.
hear that.
Yeah. And I feel like of that 95%, 80% of that's probably at work or home.
It's at work, at home, in the multifamily dwelling, all that. That's where it is. And we can install charging very easily, economically. And the idea, when you get down to the fundamental premise of what's it about, it's about how do you maximize that available capital you have. And what I mean by maximize is create more ports and create more charging events. And L2 charging does that. But we cannot and we should not discount DC fast charging, because on those routes and on those corridors and on that suburban urban rim where you need either opportunity charging or rescue charging, or you forgot to charge overnight. I mean, sometimes I forget to charge. Now I have a workplace charger, so it usually isn't a big deal because then I'll just charge there. But that exists. So we still need a mix, and you've got to have that healthy mix in order to, create, mass adoption of electric vehicles. But the opportunity is still in front of us and other companies, right? When you look, so by 2030, we need 30 million chargers in the ground. We have about 4 million give about on that number right there. It changes. So we need, roughly, 26 million more to be put in the ground. And that's at 35% pen rate. And here's what gets really scary when we talk about pen rate. California in the previous quarter was at 22. Now they're averaging a little bit lower because they had a big quarter, and Tesla amounted for a significant portion of that big quarter. But when you think about that, so they've hit 22 in one quarter. The number is published at 35% for 30 million chargers. If we start to inch above that, we need a lot more chargers, and we're here to help.
Yeah, and I think you have a really good point that if there's a higher saturation of these level 2 chargers, it'll actually lower the need to DC fast charge on a
Absolutely.
trip. And here's a perfect example. Eric, who's in the room with me right now, we drove to across the state of Michigan in a brand new Mustang Mach-E. It
Hmm.
had 270 miles of range, and we were only driving 180 miles. I would have loved to have driven all the way there and plugged in. We were at an event for 6 hours, recouped, 15 to 20 miles per hour, then
Hmm.
driven back. And no, we got to a big parking lot. There was 100 vehicles there. It was a Tesla event that we got invited to give a little speech, and we took a Mach-E kind of as a joke. And none of the vehicles were charging in that lot. It was just a lot near the beach on Lake Michigan in Muskegon. And if that lot would have been filled with 100 level 2 chargers, sometime in the future, everybody would have topped off, and then
You're done.
you're done. And so instead, we had to charge twice. I charged before I got there and then once again on the way back. And with that much range, 270 miles of range, it seemed kind of ridiculous that I had to charge twice for 20 or 30 minutes both times. I would have rather just plugged in while we were there,
And
and we
that's it.
didn't.
Destination charging it's a big part of what we're trying to do here in Blank to solve that very problem right there. That look, it's there if you need it, but don't be dependent on it. Let's charge these vehicles where they sit. And and there's some states that are being progressive about it. Massachusetts just put a rule in place that if you touch your parking garage, do any type of thing that requires a permit, you need 10% chargers. Now, it's a good start. It's not enough, but that's a good start for a whole state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we need more of that type of legislation and movement throughout the US
Yeah.
in order to drive this forward.
Yeah. So what is your thoughts and your plan on either acquiring land or real estate and the locations that are prime that charging companies are going to fight over? Are we at that point, or are you doing the convincing? Do you approach company A or B and convince them, hey, put this in? Or does a business that has a parking lot with 1,000 spots, do they shop around their charging? Like where are we at?
All of the above. All the above. So the difference between a company like Blink, and let's focus on the operated model. So we could compete against two other prime owner operator models in the US, EVgo and ChargePoint, but they do mostly DC fast charging. So, and we do a lot of L2 and we do some DC. So we're not in head to head competition, because while they're servicing maybe the lot that is on the main thoroughfare there, and they put charging in there, the garage where everybody's parking, to go, we're going to go there. And, we're going to put a whole bunch of L2s. If they have mixed use, we're going to put L2s in the residential section, and in the long dwell time retail section. And where they're going to predominantly want to put them in where it's fast moving, 30 minutes or less is usually the time frame. Now we'll do those when we have state funding to do it, and NEVI funding, which is going to be coming out for everybody, because the return on capital on a DC fast charger is really a tough equation to get around. But we can get a return on C and a positive ROI on an L2 in 18 months to 24 months, no problem. So it's a good return on capital for our investors and everyone else, and it spreads the dollars further. So sometimes we compete, but most of the time when it's hospitality, healthcare, we're just going into a big university in Southern California, and we're outfitting the whole university DC fast chargers and L2s, and it's in excess of 300 to 400 chargers for that whole university complex. And they came to us and said, "Look, we need somebody just to take it over, install, put them in, and create a positive charging experience," and that's perfect for us.
Nice. And when it comes to your hardware and obsolescence, you said the company's been around since 2009.
Mhm.
How often do you refresh the product? Do you improve the screens, the user interface, the payment methodology? Can you explain maybe your thought process on how you are refreshing old equipment, and whatnot?
So on the owner operator model, as it ages, we refresh it. But there's also a midterm thing that we do. So first, if we take, we do a lot of work on healthcare. And if we install a charger at Kaiser or Lee Valley Health or some of the multiplicity of other healthcare companies that we deal with today, if that charger breaks, we don't service chargers in the field. So we put a new one on, put that one back. That one goes back into one of our two facilities, gets refurbished, and it gets rotated back out. And as a result of that process, we build for durability and not for obsolescence. So while we do sell the chargers, we're not banking on built-in obsolescence for a quick sales turn rate. We're built banking on longevity because we don't want to constantly have to buy new chargers to put in on our owner operator model.
Yeah.
So we refresh them and update the software and the firmware both over the air and when we bring them back in to be bench tested. But on the owner operator, we keep refreshing the chargers. As a new model will come out, then we'll slowly start to replace those legacy chargers that are out there in the field with the new model. And on the sales side, the same thing applies. As we upgrade different technology, chargers 2 years ago didn't have 1511.8, which is the plug and charge, and all of our chargers do today. So we're going to have a need moving forward on the sales model that some people are going to want that technology.
Yeah. That's great. Another question I have for you that I actually hesitate to ask because I don't want to tip off any criminals. There's going to be millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of copper in the world in the form of these charging cables. I live in Detroit, and there's a huge problem where people will go into houses and pull all the copper piping out during construction. They'll steal it and return it, brazen. So is there any do you have any ever do you lose sleep at night thinking of someone showing up to one of your locations and cutting off all the cords? And I mean, is there any thought into that, or it kind of keeps me up at night because only once did I show up at a Tesla charging station and one of them was missing. It was cut off. And I'm like, somebody steal it? It was gone.
So, vandalism and theft, it is it's part of the industry. And it depends on location and its frequency rate. So it's there now. I'm happy to say it's not at an alarming percentage. Now, sometimes you have to add additional security. Sometimes you have to say there's cameras. Sometimes you have to do a more deep analysis on what's called a lumens test when you get there and create more lighting on it to deter, right? Now, you also have that on the DC fast charger, when we install that, they'll start to cut into one of those cables and it's filled with industrial liquid because they're liquid cooled cables. They stop right away. Before they get in the copper, they're drenched. And they don't go any further. And then a lot of times they're afraid to, cut the L2 chargers because they think they're live. So it's there, but it hasn't gotten to, I'd say, a hysterical level that'll keep me up. And you manage for it and you cost it out, right? We do have a vandalism and theft rate number that we look at. So when we know it, we go into the ROI analysis knowing that we're going to have to do that level of upgrade on
Yeah.
that and level of change out in the field.
Yeah, I feel like given the high cost of the high average transaction price for an electric vehicle, I feel like charging saturation is happening in higher income areas, nice malls, California. And as EVs become cheaper over the course of the next decade, it will penetrate areas that have traditionally higher crime rates. And that's usually the last place for new technology to penetrate. So,
But we need to do it.
yeah, we have to do it.
And
It's something that living in Detroit, and I lived in Flint, Michigan for 5 years as well. If it's not bolted down and it's made of copper, it's gone. And it's, you know, something I've thought of.
and and we see a slightly so we have a inner city and air quality disadvantage and income disadvantage program for chargers and vehicles in Los Angeles. So the vandalism rate's a little higher on those chargers, but you go back to the same type of things. Is you keep them visible, keep them updated, and then hopefully the community starts to adopt the technology better, and then they start to make sure that those, because we do car share on these chargers, and then the community wants the cars and they know they want to, so they self-police to a degree. And that's what you have to do, is you have to really make them part of the community. And really where we only see high levels of vandalism where there's a high homeless percentage around a particular station. But again, we're quick on it. We go back in, pop it out, put a new one on, send that charger back, attach a new cable to it, and recirculate. And that model is serving us well.
Nice. How big is your fleet for that repair operation? Do you have a certain number of people within a distance of the chargers, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so we have a national contract, and all the drivers within that national contract have chargers in the truck.
Oh, nice.
And they're not allowed to go to an L2 site without the charger in the truck. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's now on DC fast charger, it's a little different because you do a lot of field service on that.
Yeah.
But what you do is you create a learning system, and you use your firmware and your software together to diagnose chargers remotely to prevent the truck from being rolled. And you go for about an 80% number that you can fix most problems over the air, and then the 20% you got to roll. You got to roll the truck, but you make sure the truck is stacked because you don't want repeat rolls. It's not economically viable in a service situation. But it's a learning system. So the more repairs you do on a particular charging platform, the smarter you get. And then, you're up to a high percentage level of letting, institutional knowledge combined with, I'm not going to say AI, but close to AI intelligence that says what you need to do and become more efficient. And that's where we're going as an industry. We're reducing the overall cost over time. The chargers on the L2 side are becoming a little commoditized. So the price is coming down on them. The price of replacing them and servicing them is getting better as we have scale. And that you're going to see that trend continue.
Yeah. So when it comes to your products versus the competitors, having worked at EVgo and Electrify America, how do you think you stack up? And do you do any benchmarking? Because at Munro Associates, we're tearing down electric vehicles like crazy. And we're always comparing and contrasting everything from the material choices to the fastening strategies. How do you think you stack up? And do you have anything in the pipeline you can either talk about or intimate
Yeah,
that's coming?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and you have to unpack it a little bit to get it, what the true facts are. Both EVgo and EA on the owner operator model, they don't produce any of their own equipment.
Mm-hmm.
It's all third party contract manufacturing. We do some third party contract manufacturing as well. So for all of that, we'll stack our chargers up against theirs every day. On the L2 side, we specialize in that. And this is all we do 24/7. And we're slowly migrating the majority of our L2 chargers over to we build them. We're at 75% and growing on that number. So I'll take all of them on all day because all of them are going to go to a third party manufacturer. I'm vertically integrated. I control the manufacturing quality and the network compatibility with that. When you're managing multiple platforms, that gets more complex. So on L2, I'm just going to shout and say we're good. And DC fast charger, there's a degree of, I would say, sameness and equality moving across the board. What the change is going to happen is who's moving to new technology. And what we see the sort of the interesting machinations is when we first started putting in 350 kilowatt charging about 4 or 5 years ago now. You used a standard pedestal where you had a pedestal up front and you had all the power modules and everything on a power platform next to the transformer, next to the rectifier, and the switchgear. Well, now you're seeing standalone units that are 350 kilowatts. So there's a bit of a change there. And then the other one is reducing the form factor internally by getting away from the previous standard on power modules and moving to silicon carbide. And power modules with silicon carbide have a much smaller form factor interior, less heat issues within the interior of the charger, creating more room and creating a reduced size. So right now we're in final development of our 240 kilowatt DC fast, and that will have silicon carbide and it will support both CCS and Tesla.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I saw that. That was right front and center, or actually to the left on your website. I saw
Uh-huh.
that. That looks like it's a smaller form factor as well because
It's
yeah.
it's all, so it's 240, which we did. And there's the popular that 350s hit, but there's
You rarely
there's
get
no
that in the charging curve. Yeah.
there's no vehicles that charge at 200.
No.
The Taycan's getting kind of close, but beyond that, there's nobody at that. And most profiles drop.
Yeah.
And when you do it a long time, you get to tell a type of vehicle by their charging profile.
Yeah.
Because then you know it, and you can look at the profile and go, oh, well, that's an Audi. Oh, that's a Ford Mustang over there.
It's like
because everyone has. It
It's
is
like the fingerprint.
It is their fingerprint.
Yeah.
And you get really geeked out on it, but it's kind of fun to kind of recognize a vehicle by that. But they all flatten out at sub 2 and right in there, and they run. A really elegant profile is when you peak and then you drop a bit, and then you got a good run rate on that on a plateau, and you got some that do that, and that's really good for the driver of that car.
Yeah, I've taken road trips with F-150 Lightning, Rivian R1S, Rivian R1T, a Mach-E, and then Tesla. Sandy and I did an 8,000-mile road trip in 11 days.
Wow.
And a lot of people are like, and one of the days we weren't going anywhere. We were in California. We stayed for a day. So really it was 8,000 miles in 10 days of driving. And we charged, I think, 48 times in that trip. All Tesla supercharging stations except for one overnight charger in Corpus Christi, Texas, where we went to SpaceX. Anyways. And so it was 47 charge stations, and it was nice. I have all that data, and people are like, I don't believe that you did that many charges in that long, and you pulled a log and everything's time stamped, and it's like, we did it. So I truly think in order to be in this space, you have to kind of walk the walk, take a long road trip to experience it. And I've taken road trips in non-Tesla vehicles, and we're not using the Tesla supercharger network. And there's still a little bit to be desired there but it's getting better. And I think that the NACS topic is really overblown. The connector's not that important, but really it's the number of chargers, the location of the network, and the seamless nature with which the vehicle interfaces with the charging system. And that can be a standard or a goal that your company or other charging companies can get to, that same level of interoperability where you pull up, you plug in, and it's charging, with eliminating as many steps as possible and also improving the preconditioning of the vehicle as you approach it. Now, that's really most important for DC fast charging, and your bread and butter being the level 2. It's not necessarily as important. It's just getting plugged in quickly so you can get in the store, get in the mall, wherever. If it's a long process of making payment or scanning a QR code or pulling a credit card out, people will be more likely to just go in and get their stuff and charge at home. So what are you doing studying the user experience, and what types of strides and improvements have you made over time, and where do you think you'll be in the future?
So it's a great question, and I agree with you. It's a lot of overblown stuff. I'll start with one stat. Our number one plug-in vehicle today is a Tesla by my make, and it's going to be a number one vehicle tomorrow too. So when we add a Tesla cable to our charger, and we've already experimented with this. So we actually did it for shits and grins on a L2 last week, and we just took the cable, attached it, and then went to charge a vehicle. Uh, no problem. So it's very easy to do, but then it comes into the advantages of how a proprietary network emerged, as you outlined, and the proprietary network could embed everything in the vehicle and the charger and the payment system, all that, because it's closed, right? So now the great experiment is going to be, okay, how do you take that and then you say you're going to have a multiplicity? So what's the payment system? Where does the data go? Who owns it? So we have yet to work that out, and we haven't heard much on it, right? So 1511.8 is plug and charge, but it's CCS plug and charge. And it still has a lot of kinks to be worked out for it, but it has potential. And then the 1511.8 chip, when you embed it in a charger, gives you vehicle to grid and other technologies as well, because the same chip manages both. So there's still a lot to be worked out. Ours is we're going to follow the OEM, and we're going to determine what we need to program on a software basis and a firmware basis to meet that unified customer experience that you want. Some of what is out there, because Tesla was proprietary, they weren't first to put credit cards on units, which is the number one failure point for a customer. They didn't have to do it, and now hopefully California and some other states repeal policy that mandated an old mag strip credit card reader being installed. I mean, you want to create customer dissatisfaction? Yeah, have that. And if we can go back to simplifying the experience, but we still have to say, okay, if it's a universal charger, we have to figure out that multiplicity of payment, privacy of data. I'm certain that Ford doesn't want all their data going to Tesla. They're competitors. So you got to figure that part out and still create that seamless experience. So we're talking about that. We're engaging with partners on that. To your point on the minute we made an announcement and we'd already were working on it, we've had 7, 8, 9, 10 cable manufacturers just beating down our doors. And we've already moved into an RFP that we're going to be launching soon on who's going to supply our cables and connectors. This is the good news about the industry, that sort of the Tesla thing is muddled, is that it is matured in its manufacturing capacity. Tesla fabricates everything, so it's a different thing, right? That out there for CCS and globally, we've spawned a whole industry, and they're getting ready to pivot. I talked to my friends at ABB, and they're like, Tesla, yeah, we're just dropping the cable on. Yeah, this is, come on, guys. Where's the big deal? And we feel the same way. And I talked to some of the other charging manufacturers, and we all have the same attitude toward this. We're not sure. People are going crazy about this and says, guys, this is just a matter of adding the cable. But we have to be careful, though, as an industry, and we have to educate drivers, or we're going to have some backlash. Because in your Mach-E, you can't charge at a Tesla station today. And unless it's a brand new station with a 10 to 12-foot cable, you'll never be able to charge it. And we've got this expectation that you're going to be able to just go to the legacy Tesla stations and charge. That's not happening, folks. And so you got to keep that in mind. If you servicing multiple groups, you need a minimum of 12 to 14-foot cable, and then you have to have some significant cable management to keep it off the ground and off the car.
Yeah. And that was what was so elegant about the Tesla stations, is that the cable was short and it was like the perfect distance to the car. And
Sure.
I never liked having to back in. It's like, man, I'm just driving and now I got to pull into the parking lot and back in. Like, why didn't they just put it in the front? I guess they could have, but it makes sense because it's best for the car based on the location of the power electronics and the distance from the port to the power electronics. it makes sense because other vehicles with ports in different areas end up having a less than ideal cost. So Tesla's even
You
thinking,
you lose a bit of efficiency, but it's not the efficiency. And I'm not the engineer, but you get beyond a 14, even a 12, even you start to lose some efficiency and power, but it's not drastic.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not drastic, but you are right. There's an ideal port between 6 to 7 feet on the cable right there, and from the charger itself. Yeah.
yeah. And usually there's one pull through spot at Tesla stations. Usually there's one, but it only is for pulling forward where it's the back left corner is your charge.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if a Mach E, I think, is front left. So you'd have to be sticking out into the parking lot a little
You
bit.
sticking out or laying across.
Multiple. Yeah.
Yeah, which is never good. That's bad charging etiquette. So
Yeah.
we'll see on this. They may upgrade some. Ford may upgrade some, but if you're a Tesla driver and you're coming up the I-5, you're going to go, I don't want any more vehicles at these stations. I have
Yeah.
to queue now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so guess what? We'll put them in a bunch of different places and create a release valve
Yeah.
with our stations, through the NEVI program and everything else. So it's good, but we have to still deliver. Nobody likes to charge, just like they don't like to go to the gas station, right?
Yeah, and what I would really love is restaurants. If you offered free charging at a restaurant, hey, come in, order a meal, and get free charging. Because a restaurant, you're going to be there for an hour and a half,
It's
maybe 2
destination
hours.
location. Yep, all
That's
day.
like obviously hotels, but then restaurants. I'm like, man, that'd be
We're hitting them up every day with opportunities. If there's a rebate in the area, we tell them we can get a rebate. We can install this cheap. So it's part of our sales plan, and they're getting there, right? They're starting to see it, and it's all who's the property management company, and that's what we do on our site acquisition team. They manage that, they negotiate it, and then they get the installs.
all right. Well, this is great. I'm getting a lot of new insight here. I called you the grandfather of charging. I meant to call you the godfather, and I felt bad. I'm like, I'm like, because I was as you were talking, I'm formulating. I'm like, man, I feel like I'm talking to somebody from The Godfather. And I said grandfather. But anyways, just want to clarify there.
Well, I'll take godfather or grandfather. It's fine.
Oh man. Anyways, so thanks for all that information on the charging. But now I want to shift gears a little bit and go to automotive industry trends. What's your thoughts on the year that EVs will make up 50% or more new car sales? What year do you think? I mean, a lot of people are predicting stuff, but I'll let you form your own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at, let's go in the United States and let's break it up a bit. So we know there's a point of no return in California. So 2035, you just can't sell them, right? So, if you look at a realistic estimate, that means before that date, you're going to be at 50% penetration. So let's break that up real quick. That is the fifth, or arguably the sixth largest economy in the world, is going to be that way. Now let's go the other way and let's look at the Netherlands and let's look at Amsterdam. And so, Norway just shocks everybody, right? And so Amsterdam's looking at Norway and they're going, okay, what do we do? So 2 weeks ago, they passed legislation to ban any internal combustion engine from coming into the city, doesn't matter what the platform is, in 2025. So, and you're seeing other municipalities throughout Europe adopt similarly strict things. So 50% pen, depending on the region in the world and in the United States, we're going to see, before that 2035 timeframe, and you'll see the accelerated one in the US and California, New York, Massachusetts, and others who adopt that 2035 mandate. Now, what happens then is, and what we can't predict and we can't measure, but it's kind of this is where the guesswork comes in. You can probably put an algorithm on this, get a better answer than I'm going to give you. But you have the pressure from the OEMs aren't going to make, this car and that car. So the choices become more EV centric. If you're looking at a dealership in California, you're starting to wind down on ICE sales, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years in advance of that, right? And getting your sales up. And then the availability in the other states starts to dwindle on the ICEs, which has an accelerant effect on EV adoption. So now that's the part that's hard to measure, right? So I'm thinking 2035, we're approaching globally over the 50% in Europe, and then the US, we're getting close to that number in that time frame, based on all those variables mixed together.
Yeah. Yeah, you have some good reasoning there because California would have to be closer to 75% in 2030 to offset states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, the Midwestern states, which are rural. And there is some, large municipalities. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And then Texas and Florida, which may be more opposite from a political perspective when you're considering adoption of these green policies and rules and regulations, which will be less than 50. So, yeah, in order to get the US above 50, I know Sandy Munro was thinking 2028 to 2030, and I'm more that 2030 to 2032, 2033. And you gave that 5-year window. It's a pretty big window, but that's all right.
Well, a lot of variables.
Yeah.
I
And
have to put a data scientist on it to give me
yeah.
exact, but look, if it's that, I mean, that's just huge. Even if we hit the number by, your analysis, right? That means we're short on what everybody's planning for on chargers already.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So yeah, you're lined up for a real busy decade or more.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't matter whether you're a red state or a blue state, and we have to think about this evolution about this. First, the fuel is all domestically produced. This is American jobs. It adds American jobs at our power companies, at our utilities, at our productions. It adds more green energy to supply, which is high-tech American jobs. More and more companies are producing here. We're building the greater majority of our chargers out of our facility in Bowie, Maryland. More American jobs. So before you get into, whether you're environmentalist or not, we're looking at EVs or a jobs program, and they're a high-tech jobs program, for the U.S. economy, including the EV infrastructure players out there. And then, are there benefits for air quality? Absolutely. Look, I have got a picture that I keep on my desktop of California during the height of COVID when nobody was driving. And two of my friends sent me individual pictures from their houses, and they could see further and clearer than they'd ever seen in their entire lives in California. So regardless of whether you're environmentally focused or not, there's this huge benefit to lifestyle and improvement in an EV. One of the things I saw when I was in Amsterdam last week is they cut down so much on vehicular traffic. It is now it's a great city to walk around to begin with. So you got that. But, I'm a big fan of New York, but the vehicular traffic and noise pollution associated with it, it's a little unsettling at times. So this world that we're going into, it's just going to be more pleasant across the board, regardless of what side of the table you sit on your political ideology. And I think that's what's kick-ass about this space.
Yeah, that's a great point about noise pollution because normally you think of pollution, and you mentioned your friends at ABB. Myself and 4 other people from Munro, we were at the ABB Formula E race in Portland this weekend. A little different. I'm a big NASCAR fan, which is like sacrilegious because it's they burning ethanol and big V8s, but it was different. It was quiet, and ABB actually hosted us. They brought us as media influencers, even though we're an engineering firm. So we play this weird balance where we have a 100-person engineering firm, and then we have this YouTube channel / podcast. And Sandy and I went along with Eric, Mike, and Sue, and we had a chance to talk to those ABB people as well. I think his name was Bob, the e-mobility guy.
I know Bob really well.
Yep. Yeah.
They're good people.
Yeah.
And they aren't all this industry, it's blessed because you got a lot of people that believe in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you don't see that, always. And, we like to joke around, or I like to joke around, we are changing the world one charger at a time.
Yeah.
And, and I truly believe that.
Yeah. I have another interesting question for you about charging. So, it's about the payment method. So, I'm really digital now. I have Venmo, I have PayPal, I have Cash App, I have Chase Quick Pay on my phone. I have all my credit cards stored here. So, if someone stole my wallet, I'd actually be fine. If someone stole my phone and not my wallet, I'd also be fine. So, I have this redundancy, this digital redundancy. But one thing that I could not do is take a road trip in an EV with cash. It like I think it might not even be possible.
It's not.
It's not.
No, so it grew up digitally. It's becoming more, and if we look at what's going to happen with credit card readers, I estimate it's going to become more digitally. Everything is going to either be, plug and play technology with the vehicle, and or tap and done.
Yeah.
And it's the safest and securest. Digging through your wallet for credentials or key fobs or all these other things we're beyond that. So it's the move towards a cashless society, and that's not inconsistent with other
Oh,
industries.
yeah.
So I think you're going to see that. So the question is, what do you do with the cashless? And that's sort of the digital equity issue what we have with disadvantaged communities, and how do they engage in the revolution. And we're working with the city of LA on this topic right now. How do we still create something that gives them access if they live in a cash world and EVs are all digital? And we have some solutions coming up with the city.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that it's not my thinking at all, but there's a small fraction of the United States population, probably very small, that is against being tracked, so they don't want a credit card. They want to just be off the grid completely. And this essentially puts a name to a bank account, a name to a credit card, to a location, and the amount of data that can be collected on that person is also almost of the same value
Yep.
for what you call a advertiser, because now you're collecting charge locations in front of certain businesses or certain restaurants. So now you can build a profile on where people shop, where people eat, where they stop, how frequently they stop, so that when you're actually driving home, a billboard could change and advertise to you or to a group of people a different restaurant or a sale or something. It could even get real tailored to near real time advertising based on where you're at. And I think the data side of thing is a real untapped potential. And I feel like there'll be a little bit of resistance to that, but I don't care. I like targeted
There
advertising.
will be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be there, and you're going to have holdouts that are just say they're never going to do it, and there's got to be a solution for that holdout, right? Because because this is the U.S., right? And we got to have choices and options for
Yeah.
people. You know,
Yeah. I'm always wondering, will the United States have a small pool of cars that look like what it looks like when you go to Cuba? So you go to Cuba, there's all these 1950s whatever cars
I know,
driving around.
I know
And
right where you're going.
so you'll have everyone transitioning to EVs, but instead of 1950s vehicles, you'll have 2010, Malibu, 2010, Yukons and Suburbans and whatever still on the road 80 years from now, all patinaed, and people specializing in keeping these dinosaurs alive. And I think you'll see some weird, ghost set of cars.
So I'll tell you a story that emphasizes that. So to a degree. So being a corporate person like, and we've relocated a whole lot. And the last relocation, when we left Nissan, and one of my kids who's now grown up quite a bit, but then he never really was conscious of anything but the slew of Leafs and then the test cars that I had in the driveway, and I had two chargers set up in the driveway, and and that was it. And his greatest thing as a kid was if he was in the car, he got to plug in. He loved that. That was his job, right? So he'd plug in. So we're reloading, and we're in some temporary rental cars before we got an EV. And we go up to a gas station. And he goes, "What are we doing?" And my wife goes, "Well, Connor, we got to fill the gas in the car." He goes, "Fill the You mean we're putting that smelly, dangerous stuff in a car?" He goes, "We don't drive those kind of cars." And so his reality, and now he's an adult, was that no. And, but the reality of two generations in front of him is that there's some people there that are going to be exactly that. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to spur this whole industry. So, and then you're going to have these two pressure one another. And so you'll see it just like Cuba, and it'll spawn these little industries, and then state regs will say what's included in it and there's not. I look at it like we see antique cars today, right? And what classic cars, and states have regulations on what is one and what's not, and you have mileage restrictions on them in order to get classified in there, and it can't be your everyday driver and this. So there'll be a whole class of regulations that come in to be able to keep a vehicle like that, and then exemptions for farming equipment. But everything is going to roll forward, right? We're now in aviation. We're now in marine. We're now moving into farming equipment. We're moving into port vehicles at all the different ports throughout the United States. So slowly but surely, you're going to see all different modes of transportation become electrified to a degree. Now, the big debate is on heavy duty. Does it go with predominant hydrogen, or does it go with an EV with charging? And that debate, I think it's 75% EV right now, 25% hydrogen.
Yeah. For long haul, I could see hydrogen making sense.
Yeah, me too.
But in the city, you can have a spoke and hub where you use long haul solutions to get it to a city, and then you use electric versions to get it to all the businesses and whatnot.
And that's the world I think we're going to end up living in.
Yeah.
Maybe you more so than me, but
yeah. That's a really cool story, because there's probably not that many kids that grew up with an EV only household that early, because the adoption rate is so small, and usually there would be a mix where people may have some EVs and some internal combustion
Oh,
engine.
we had a gas car. We just never drove it around town.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it did, to them, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
The EV was much more fun for them than the other car. You're the only people early that had an EV, and everybody would look at you, and I love that.
Yeah. That's really cool.
And then I had an Audi e-tron for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, the e-tron was decent. The range isn't that great. Wasn't it like 180?
Yeah, the range, they've improved it significantly in the next version. But, it's these different worlds of EVs, right? And I'm a car guy, and that's the way I cut my teeth. And the fit and finish and the stitching and everything on that was good. And, sometimes you hear people say that's the knock on Tesla. The interior finishes are more pedestrian than what you get in a true luxury car. And so what drives you? I'm driven more now towards, hey, how quality build? What's the fit and finish? Does everything line up? Do they use quality materials? And it's an EV platform. But this is why I think we're going to hit these adoption numbers.
Yeah.
Because if you want that today, you can have it.
Yeah.
You want a truck, you can have it.
Yeah. And what's your thought on the Cybertruck? Do you think it's crazy, or do you like it?
I was on Fox Business News last week, and before I got on, she started in her bit, the Cybertruck. They said it was going to be out. They say now it's going to be out again. Should we believe them? Should we not? I think, it's a tough playing field in there when you have Dodge, Chevy, and Ford in there, and then Rivian in there at, very viable trucks, right? And they got there before Tesla did. So I think Tesla's still going to have its level of adoption and backlog of sales on it. But then I think it becomes a competitive race, right? And who's really going to be the winner, to your point, in Texas, in Oklahoma, in Montana? What platform is going to win there? And we don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
So I think if they'd entered alone, you're going to see that same brilliant Tesla effect that we've seen and admired throughout the industry, right? But this one, I'm a little skeptical that they're moving into a competitive thing where you got dominant players now in there.
Yeah, my perception through all the traveling that we do. So Sandy and I, we've been to Norway, we've been to Sweden, Japan, Vietnam, all over. We go to these conferences. The most common thing I hear from people who come up and talk to us is, "Oh, I have a Model 3 right now, but I'm waiting for my Cybertruck. I'm waiting for my Cybertruck." None of the people are truck owners. They all want the Cybertruck. They have one on order. They couldn't wait. They bought a Rivian. Sandy has a Rivian, but he's like, I'm waiting until my Cybertruck gets here. And he's going to sell the Rivian. So there's this huge amount of people that aren't even truck people that want the Cybertruck, mostly because it's like this wild looking stainless steel DeLorean looking ridiculous thing. They just want it. So I think they're Tesla's not actually really even going after the truck people. They're going after another huge swath of consumers that don't even know they need a truck and don't really want a truck, but because it's an EV and it's going to have a big range and it's going to be really fast, they want it. And that's my assessment is everybody
It,
wants one.
it's a good hypothesis. Now, where I want to go over, if I'm a manufacturer on a truck, I want to have a truck that's going to work in fleet because that's where the truck business is.
Yeah.
And you got to sell to fleets.
And we'll see.
We won the post office business,
Yeah.
and so we're that's 41,500 chargers, over the next 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And
Nice.
those are all fleet applications.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge market when it comes to the truck space. Big market. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I'm too much of a traditionalist in that area. I like the Ford Lightning. I love the Rivian. So I'll go with my normal pickup truck. I think you're right, though. So your F-150 buyer is not going to go buy a Cybertruck.
No.
They're going to go buy a Ford Lightning.
Yeah. And we have a Lightning. It's in our work truck at Munro, and we have 2 that are torn down as well. But and I've driven it. It's not awe-inspiring though. You get in it and it's a truck. It's just like it's like an F-150. And
Yeah.
sure, there's a little bit of software. There's Blue Cruise and whatever, but it doesn't really it doesn't really disrupt, and most people don't know. Like, if you didn't know that the headlights were different, that's about the biggest thing. People don't know, and some people want the world to see that they drive an EV. It's like back when
Yeah,
people
they
drove
do.
Priuses to virtue signal. There's a really great South Park episode about Priuses. I don't know if you're a South Park fan, but I recommend watching it. About people buying Priuses and movie stars were buying Priuses like 12 years ago because they wanted to show that they were green. I think people still want the world to know that they're,
They do, but is that an inexhaustible buyer? I don't know. That's where, is it mainstream and is it volume? Yeah, and everybody did. I'll tell you one funny story on the bleeding edge on Leaf. So, we had a VIP program on it, and you had a lot of people that were just getting it because it's green, and I want to be green, and I want to be seen this way. But one particular celebrity in California, movie star, so he was on the VIP, so he got one of the first 100 that were out, right? Hand delivered to his house, everything. And we get a call from his assistant and says there might be a problem at the house. He's improperly charging the car. So I dispatched one of the best guys we had that managed infrastructure from us. So he gets out there and he calls me back and he says, "Hey, Brendan, what do I do?" And I go, "What do you mean? What's the problem?" He goes, "He put together a whole bunch of extension cords and they're melting to his patio." And I said, "How bad is it?" He goes, "They're melting." And I'm like, "Okay, clean it up, go buy some new extension cords, get the new charger installed, and just get out of there."
That's funny.
And so he's packing up everything, and this very well known comes out and he goes, "Hey, it looks like I have all new extension cords." And he goes, "Yours melted."
How long was it? It was like 100 feet?
Oh yeah, yeah. He had it all the way out to his driveway.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
that's the problem when someone has a property big enough where
it,
you have hundreds of feet of extension cord.
and
Yeah.
it all melted down.
That's pretty funny.
So we've come a long way since that.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. All right, well, it's been an hour. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Absolutely.
You're more fun and funnier than I thought.
There you go.
We have these guests, and sometimes it's kind of a snooze. I won't say who we've had on recently, but this has been enjoyable. So thank you,
Hey, it's fun
Brendan.
when you like the space, right? And you like the
Yeah,
dialogue and you like chatting about it and you like the hypotheticals. What
yeah,
could it be? This is what
cool.
we're about. So having this dialogue is good. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
love it.
and hopefully our viewers and listeners now know a little bit more about Brendan, his story, and his company Blink. So I
All
really
right.
appreciate it. Any last
Perfect.
statements before I sign us off?
No, buy an EV, get a good charging station. We got plenty for you. Let's keep driving the revolution.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Monroe Live podcast. Now we're going to have Eric sign us off.